Hi everybody, welcome back to another SUPboarder video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about which SUP nose bottom shapes are best for you. Is it going to be a V shape or a rounded shape? If those words do not mean anything to you, then this video is definitely the one you need to watch. We get this question a lot and we have covered it in lots of different comparison videos and maybe reviews in the past, but this is going to be a standalone video talking about the nose but at the bottom of the board. We're going to be talking about the first 2 to 3 feet, 1 meter of the board. Going to be really focusing, as I said, on the bottom shape and up to the nose. We're not going to be looking at the outline shape and we're not going to be looking at the top section of the nose. This video is going to be aiming at intermediate paddlers, but I am going to explain it in a beginner way as well. So if you're new to paddleboarding, you are going to get a lot out of this video as well. I'm going to be speaking about lots of different brands, and you'll also see a lot of older footage from our SUPboarder archives. Most of this information will be about hard composite paddleboards, but I will throw in the odd SUP, which I'll show you later on. By the end of this video, hopefully you have a good understanding of what bottom nose shape you're going to need to look for the type of paddling and the conditions you're going to be going in also. But if not, remember there is comments below, and if you've got lots more comments and you're really trying to find the perfect board for you, get onto SUPboarder Pro and onto the Ask the Experts, where we get back with infinite number of questions and answers to make sure you're on the best kit out there. So for this video, I'm going to be talking about 3 different bottom nose shapes. We're going to be talking about round, round V, and extreme V. Okay, there is obviously lots of other different combinations of those, but I'm going to put them into those 3 categories. With a round bottom nose shape, you probably guess what's going to be happening here. You have a much more domed bottom to the board. It can start further back, but it goes very round, curved all the way up to the nose of the board itself. The other thing you'll notice about a round nosed bottom is generally the rocker line, which is the curve of the board from the back to the front. You'll notice that there's more rocker with rounded nose boards. So in effect, when you're paddling it, the water's probably going to be touching the board about here, and not the full waterline length of the boards. Typical boards you'll find that have rounded noses are like these 3 here. Starboard Generation, really popular board, very rounded. SIC Bullet, another popular board, not as rounded as the Generation, but still rounded. And the last one down here, the Nash Maliko, again, a little bit flatter than the other 2, but it's still got that rounded nose more than a V nose, which we're going to speak about now. The Extreme V is where the board comes from maybe a flat at the back of the board, or even slightly rounded, but it soon goes into a very definite keel shape on the bottom of the board. That is the V. And the V can start sometimes 2-3 feet, a meter back, or even a foot further back from the nose. But you can see on this clip here, the JP Australia GTS, you can see where this V is starting to come up on the bottom of the board. And that V then continues right around the nose of the board and even sometimes comes up onto the top of the board as well. Those type of extreme Vs will have the characteristics of having a flatter rocker line board, so the complete opposite to that rounded rocker line. So the whole of the board's waterline length is in the water. So if you are paddling a 14-foot board, 14 foot from the tail to the nose is touching the water the whole time when you're paddling it. Boards with more of that extreme V, you're going to be looking at boards like the Starboard Sprint, the Starboard Waterline, the JP Flat Water Race Board, the Infinity Whiplash, SIC Okeanos, and a board like the Fnatic Strike. Now, looking at the one in between, the round V, you're probably guessing it's a combination of the 2. So it may start off round or flat in the middle of the board, and it may transition a little bit more into a slight V, but the slight V is starting very much at the front of the board, maybe the last 4 inches, just up at the front there. So it's transitioning from the round into the V, and the V sometimes carries on like the Extreme V right around the nose and can even still go up onto the top of the board. The rocker line of this is usually a bit flatter, but sometimes they can have a little bit of curve in them as well. Boards with a round V, looking at Starboard Touring Board, the SIC RS and the Nash Javelin. Now, before I move on to when and why these bottom nose shapes work best, remember when designers are making boards, they haven't got to pick these 3 categories. They can do a bit of everything and make a board completely different. So this is hopefully just giving you the rough idea of 3 different categories. So when you look at a board shape, you can try and work out what these different shapes of the boards are going to feel on the water. So when and why would we choose these nose shapes? When do they perform best? Okay, let's talk about Extreme V. Generally, these boards are designed for flat water conditions. And because they have got flatter rocker lines, remember, that's the curve of the board from front to back, get my words out, that's going to make the board faster to paddle because you're using more of the board's waterline length. And because it's got that V, when you go to put your power down in your paddle stroke, the board is going to track in the direction you are pointing much, much easier. So therefore, you're going to be swapping sides less, which means it's going to be even quicker again. And the nose shape, just touching on the nose shape right at the front of the board, it's got that classic wave piercing nose. So the water will wrap up around the nose, being very mesmerizing to watch. It's very good at punching through that little bit of chop. But remember, ankle high at the most. So flat water fast board. We could be talking racing, we could be talking fitness paddling, we could be talking touring, but you're talking about going quicker on flat water. So now the round nose bottom shape. It's going to be opposite to the Extreme V. So it's going to be able to handle flat water, but it's going to be much, much happier in choppier waters. Shin high, knee high, waist high, proper open ocean swell. Because of that rounded nose and also because of that rocker line, it's going to be sticking up a little bit more in the water. So it's going to let itself ride over bumps much, much easier. Because of that, it's not going to be as fast as a flatter rocker line. And it does mean you aren't going to be paddling as straight a line as a more of a Extreme V. But it does mean that it's very easy for you to adjust where your board is going. So just with a small paddle stroke, you'll be able to turn your board much more effectively. The opposite to the Extreme V. And when you're punching into chop or going out over waves, the board is not going to have that wave piercing nose like the Extreme V has. It's going to be much more of a slappy board. It's going to be going up and over the waves, which if you're trying to paddle fast, remember, is not as quick. Then the round V, you're probably getting the gist of it. It's really a compromise between the 2. So it's going to be pretty good in flat water. It's going to be pretty good at handling itself up to shin high chop. It's still going to be fast because the rocker line in general is a little bit flatter. It's still going to be fairly easy to paddle in a straight line when you are in flatter water conditions because that little bit of the V up the nose is keeping your board tracking straight. So you're going to be able to put the power down, you're going to be able to paddle fast, and it's got the characteristics of the wave piercing nose. So the board is going to punch through the waves really effectively, use its full waterline length, and you're going to have that water maybe coming up over the board and displacing off the side. The opposite to the round, similar to the Extreme V. Okay, the other one I've dragged into the studio, I've had to deflate it to fit it in. This is the Shark SUP race board. There's a few other race boards in the market with a similar nose shape. So what is this? This is a wave piercing nose, but round bottom shape. So it's still going to have the maneuverability and the tracking of more of a round bottom nose shape, but it's going to have the wave piercingness of the Extreme V. So that's just a good example of an SUP where they're doing a little bit more of nose shape. Okay, so hopefully now a lot of you are starting to get the understanding of what these different bottom nose shapes are doing under the water. There's a really big point that I'm going to strongly bring up to make you aware of the limitations of V. Now V is an amazing thing on the nose of the board. It makes you paddle fast, it makes you paddle straight, it can be great on a racing board, it can be great on a touring board. But the main issue or thing to be aware of when you're buying into a board like that is because it's so good at tracking in a straight line or you setting the board where you want it to go and it just keeps going in that direction because of the V up at the nose, which is almost like a little front rudder, imagine it. It just sets the keel and it just goes in that direction. If you're using it in choppy conditions, whether you're paddling just off from the wind, downwind, sometimes even into the wind. If a wave hits your board and pushes you to the left or the right, the V then initiates and feels the direction it wants to go in, and it will carry on going in that direction. It's like you point, it goes, which is a great thing to have on flat water, but when you're using it in choppy water and your board's moving around a lot, it can really throw a lot of people off guard. And if you're using maybe touring and you've got weight up on the front of the board and you want to try and bring that nose back up, imagine the V in the bottom of the board, and it's that keel. It's really keeping your board straight and it's going. You're trying to take that pointy bit V and push it sideways through the water to redirect it to the direction you want to go in, which is the opposite obviously to a round or a flatter bottom board. You know, if something happens here with the generation, the board moves off, well, you just paddle a little bit harder on that side or just lean your body weight and it just pushes itself, it slides across the bottom of the board. So it's very quick to react. Now you'll see that some top racers are on extreme V boards in very choppy conditions. Now the reason they're on those boards is because they are still faster, but they're having to really work those boards. They're having to move back on their boards, they're having to trim their boards, having to bring the nose up to spill this V, to get this V out of the way so they can be riding off the further back part of the board where it's flatter. So it requires a lot more effort, a lot more concentration. So the question we're getting all the time is, should I buy into maybe a starboard touring board, or should I buy into a SIC Okeanos, or should I buy into a starboard generation? And the answer's always coming back is, how much and what type of water conditions are you going to be paddling in? Are you going to be paddling in choppy waters, open sea, 50% of the time? Or are you going to be paddling in flat water lakes that don't get the wind 80% of the time? If you're going down that flat water set route and it's really flat all the time, or you know the chop isn't any more than shin high, then you could be looking at extreme V. It's going to be faster, it's going to keep you in that straight line, it's going to be the better board to paddle. But if you're going to be going out in open waters, seas, if you're paddling in the sea a lot, if you're paddling in places where you don't know what the conditions are like, you're traveling around a lot, then definitely looking more to a rounded bottom nose shape. It's going to be much more forgiving for you. It's not going to be fastest, so on those flat water days, you're not going to be paddling as far or as fast in that session. But if the wind comes up, or you're paddling crosswind, it's going to be so much easier to keep that paddle stroke on one side. It's like having two people driving a car. One person's driving that way and the other person's driving that way. That's sort of what the extreme V is doing in the choppy water conditions, unless you've got the balance and the knowledge and the skill to really work that board efficiently. Remember, everything is always a compromise. Getting that perfect board is a hard decision, but if you understand why these bottom nose shapes make a difference, even if I haven't mentioned this board or shown a clip of a certain board in this video, hopefully you can look at the bottom shape and go, well, it's got a small V coming up to here, so I know that if the board's going to be penetrating the nose all the way up, that V is going to help me on flat water, it's going to make me track well, but when it gets choppy, it's still going to be a bit of a handful. But remember, there's still going to be design elements put into each of these boards that are different, like for instance the Nash Maliko, that's quite a flat bottom nose board, but it's still a very fast board, it's still very quick, it can keep up with some of the more extreme Vs on flat water. But then there's so many other elements that go into play for speed and manoeuvrability. But the V is a really big important point, and hopefully now with this video it's giving you a really good understanding of what it does when you're paddling on the water, for the good and for the bad. If you've got any comments, if you found this video useful, please let us know, give us a like and all that sort of stuff. If you've got loads more questions, definitely get on to Ask the Experts on SUPboarder Pro. We'll happily answer. You know, we get hundreds of questions about getting you on the right kit, and we'll happily find the best board out there for you wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much. Please subscribe, and we'll see you on another SUPboarder video real soon.